Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Schaefer, host of the Finding Love Summit, and I am pleased to welcome Rhonda Britten to the summit this year. In our conversation, Rhonda and I talked about fear and fearless living. She told the story of the worst day of her life and the fear she had to overcome. We covered how to identify fear in your life. Turns out fear is universal and likely getting in your way in subtle and not so easy ways to recognize. We also tackle the importance of body sensations, why you don't do what you know you should do, and what to do when your partner is responding from their fears. And finally, the importance of compassionate responses, both for yourself and others. Rhonda Britten, Emmy Award winner, repeat Oprah guest, master coach, has changed lives in over 600 episodes of reality television, is the author of 4 bestsellers, including her seminal work, Fearless Living, and is the founder of the Fearless Living Institute, home of the Ivy League of life coaching training. Named America's favorite life coach, she brings the neuroscience of fear down to earth, giving you a path out of not being good enough using her wheels technology she developed that saved her own life. Find out more at www.fearlessliving.org. Please enjoy my conversation with Rhonda Britten. Hi, Rhonda. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
I am so excited to be here.
Yeah, I have been listening. I like to listen to audiobooks. So I've been listening to your book, Fearless Living, and really enjoying it. I think you present the topics in such a good way. And you've got a pretty powerful story to tell about how you got to this idea of fearless living. So I wanted to ask if you tell everybody else how you got into this.
Oh, sure. And it wasn't something, people are like, I think people are afraid of their stories, like afraid of their worst day of their lives. Like they don't want to share it. I know that was me. I didn't want to share it.
Yeah.
And I actually thought the worst day of my life took me out of the ability to do what I do today. Right.
Mhm.
Now, when I started coaching, it was 1995. So there was like 5 of us, right? There was no coaching industry. But, I thought because of my past, I thought my past did determine my future. I thought I was stuck with those experiences and those results, right?
Yes.
So what you're mentioning is the worst day of my life, and still the worst day of my life. I don't know if anything, pray knock on wood, that anything could make that worse, but hopefully never again. And my father and mother were getting a divorce, and my father's coming over on Father's Day to take us out to brunch. And there's 3 kids, two adults going out to dinner. Not a big, like, we didn't do that. We're from Upper Michigan. You don't go out to eat. So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
So my dad walks in the door. Come on, come on, come on. My mom is in her bedroom, putting up her, fluffing up her beehive hair, putting on her rose colored lipstick. And my dad yells, come on, come on, come on. Right. And so me and my mom start walking out. My 2 sisters, I have 2 sisters, are in the bathroom fighting it out. Our little small 1-bedroom, our 3-bedroom, 875 square foot house with our 1 bathroom. Mm-hmm. So we start walking out and it starts sprinkling. So my dad says, I got to get my coat from the car. And his coat was a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. And back then that was pretty gosh darn hot. And so my sister's still in the bathroom fighting it out. And as my father opens his trunk to grab his coat, I noticed that he does not grab a coat, but he grabs a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother, you made me do this, you made me do this. And he fires. And I start screaming, Dad, what are you doing? Stop, Dad, what are you doing? And he cocks the gun, points it at me. And I absolutely believe I'm next.
Yes.
He and I, eyeball to eyeball, blink, he blinks, I blink, he blinks, I blink. And my mother, with already 1 bullet in her, looks up and sees that gun in my face and screams, no, don't. Mm-hmm. And my father, realizing my mother's still alive, takes that gun intended for me, that bullet intended for me, and points it at my mother and shoots her a second time. And the second bullet goes through my mother's abdomen, out her back, and lands in the car horn. And for the next 20 minutes, all I heard was, and then my father cocks the gun again, drops to his knees, and puts the gun to his head and fires.
Oh, wow.
So in a matter of 2 minutes, my father murdered my mother and committed suicide in front of me. And, I don't know how other people would have dealt with it, Julie, but this is how I dealt with it.
How old were you?
My fault. It was my fault, right?
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 14.
14. Okay.
Yep.
It was your
right?
fault.
So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I absolutely believe, because I did nothing heroic to save my mother, right? I didn't kick his shins. I didn't grab the gun. I didn't, Superman it across my mother's body, right? I just stood there and said, stop. No, Dad, stop, right? So at 14 years old, I absolutely believed it was my fault. So in that moment, I split into two, the outside me and the inside me. The outside me was straight A student, still was a straight A student afterwards, class president, played basketball,
Right.
lead in the play, sang in every solo, right? Like the outside me, I'm fine. 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 But the inside me, not so fine, Julie, not so fine at all. And basically by the time I hit college, I found alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And then I liked it a lot and became an alcoholic. And over those 20 years, I became an alcoholic. Got 3 DUIs, 3 suicide attempts. The third suicide attempt, they put me in a psychiatric ward to get evaluated to deem me not crazy. And I spent a little time in jail for that third DUI. And it was that third suicide attempt, Julie, that I realized I got to figure out a better way, because those 20 years, those after my parents died, Alden College, etc. I was going to workshops. I was going to therapy. I was reading books. Like I was doing all the right things, right?
Yes.
I was doing everything everyone told me to, and more, because I'm a self-help junkie, right? I'm a personal development. I love learning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was reading my first self-help book when I was 12.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where, just put me in that category.
Right.
So I was doing everything that I could. I worked with shamans, inner child work, therapy, you name it, I've done it. And when that third suicide attempt happened and I didn't die and they didn't deem me crazy and I was sent home alone to my studio apartment, that was when I realized that I really did have to figure out a better way, because everything that I had done gave me great tools, right? And it was lovely, right? Reading a book on how to love yourself is lovely until you try to do it, right? You don't know. I mean, I always say, don't tell me to love myself. How do I do that when you don't know how do you do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was at that third suicide attempt when I realized I had to figure out another way. And it was really my journey towards what became fearless living. I started making up exercises for myself out of desperation, not something I was proud of, because again, why are you making up exercises? You must be really screwed up, right? And it was only after I'd done this for a few years, making up different exercises, doing them, changing my life, starting to have a relationship with fear, understanding how fear worked, etc., that these 2 people followed me out of church and were like, well, what are you doing, Rhonda? You're different. And I was like, nothing. They're like, no, you're doing something different. I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything different. And they basically would not release me until I told them what I was doing. And I said, I'm making up exercises. And they're like, what? They go, give us one. And I'm like, what? And so I gave them one, feeling very foolish doing it, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next week at church, they came back and said, it's working. Do you have another one? And that was the moment, Julie, that I was like, oh, maybe this isn't just for me. Now, it took me a few more years to actually to own it. But the seed was planted in that moment, like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not here just for myself.
Yeah.
Just to save myself.
Yeah. So fear was huge. It loomed very large in your life.
But I never said I was afraid, Julie.
Why not?
Never. No, that's the thing that I always find hysterical is, that I have become an expert at fear, and it's the very thing that I would never admit. And I think I'm not alone here. I think most people don't admit it, right? Yeah. They admit that they're procrastinating, they admit they're overwhelmed, but they don't admit they're afraid.
Right.
And I was the same. I mean, I grew up in Upper Michigan. We don't have feelings, so we don't have fear, right? There's no feelings there. I'm Finnish. I'm 100% Finnish. So all those people don't feel either. So I had double duty of not feeling. So I never said I'm afraid or I'm scared. I just blamed the world, right? And then blamed myself, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started being willing to tell myself the truth and face myself and face my father, and more importantly, face my mother,
And when you say tell yourself the truth, you mean the truth of your
Tell,
story or?
tell myself the truth of my, yeah, 'cause even just my story.
Mhm.
Like tell myself the truth about my drinking, tell myself the truth about my story. I mean, I remember a friend of mine told me, I was still drinking at this time, and he said, "Oh, you came from an abusive family." And I went, "What are you talking about? I wasn't abused." And he's like, "Okay, let me think about this. You were 12 years old, your father tried to strangle you." Uh-huh. "And your father killed your mother." I'm like, "Uh-huh." And I was like, "What?" I mean, I did not want to see, right? I didn't want to name it, right? I didn't
Right.
want to believe it, right? And it was only after I told myself the truth that I was able to see how afraid I really was of who I was, where I'd come from, what blood was running through my veins,
Mhm.
just the whole, just everything,
Everything.
petrified.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody, and I've had this happen when I work with clients and they're like, well, I'm fine. I'm confident. I don't have a problem with confidence. Right. I'm not afraid.
Yeah, I say
And
good pal. I always say good for you. I go, can I give you a little quiz? And then I pull out my quiz, and they go, yeah, give me, because when they think they're fine. I'm like, first of all, why are you here then?
yes.
Right? Okay, great. It sounds like everything's great. So I'm a little confused. Tell me why you're here. And then they're like, well, I don't know. I just thought I'd just check things out. Right? It's like, okay. And then I give them this quiz. Give them a quiz, Julie.
Mhm.
And when I give this quiz is when their face drops and they go, oh,
Oh,
okay,
right.
okay.
Okay. Do you have the quiz there?
Oh, I do. I have the quiz. So I'll just do part of it because it's
Okay.
longer, but I'll just do some of it. So I ask people to go ahead and shut your eyes, shut your eyes, shut your eyes, shut your eyes, and nod your head if you do any of these things or feel any of these things. And the reason I ask them to shut their eyes and nod their head is so that they don't look outside themselves and notice people, notice me, notice anything.
Right.
And then I say, do you ever deny yourself? Do you ever hide out? Do you ever judge? Do you ever isolate? Do you ever blame? Do you ever wait and call it patience? Do you ever settle? Do you ever get defensive? Do you ever struggle? Do you ever compare? What about worry? What about procrastinate? What about compromise yourself? What about pretend everything's okay when it's not? What about complaining, controlling, manipulating? And do
Wow.
you ever
And
feel, right?
people would, I mean, everybody does those things, right?
Everybody does those things, but they think they're individual problems.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what I share is that you don't get bitter unless there's a fear, right? So bitterness, overwhelm, procrastination, right? What comparing, anxiety, right? Those things aren't individualized out in the world. Like, those are actually coming from a source.
Mhm.
And that source is fear, and what I call the wheel of fear. So that wheel of fear, that source, that core fear that you have gives you permission to do those fear responses called procrastination, overwhelm, anxiety, right? Whatever yours are.
Right.
And most people though think of, oh, I wish I didn't procrastinate. What's my problem? There's something wrong with me. Or I compare, I shouldn't compare. I should know better. Oh my God, I wish I didn't compare. What's my, right? And they make it a character flaw. They make it something wrong with them. Like they should know better, and they know better. So why don't they do better? Right.
Right. Right.
But what they don't understand is they have a complete disconnect. They think they're individual issues. They don't see that it's really from the source that I've named the wheel of fear.
Okay.
And once you understand how the wheel of fear works, then you see where all of those, what we call fear responses, how they show up and where they come from. And then after you understand that, just understand your wheel of fear, then when you procrastinate, it's not like, what's my problem? It's like, exactly what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And you worry, you're like, oh my God, I should quit worrying. You know exactly how to quit worrying. Right. So there's no more, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? And I think a lot of evolved people still say, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this?
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't really have an understand of their mental model. They don't understand how they really work.
Right.
From a neurological perspective, from a biological perspective, right? They don't understand how the brain works, even though I always say neuroscience is great, but knowing the amygdala and the hippocampus, it's nice, but in the middle of the fight, with your spouse, and you say, it's my hippocampus, that doesn't help.
No.
Right?
Right.
Doesn't help.
Right.
Knowledge is nice, but why don't we actualize instead?
Yeah. So do you have people go through the wheel of fear, identify their wheel of fear so that they can figure out what to do in the moment?
Absolutely. I mean, understanding how your fear works, understanding what makes up what I call the wheel of fear, because they're unique and personalized. So Julie, yours is different than mine, right? We're not going to have the same wheel. We might have overlapping parts. Like you and I might do some things the same, but there's going to be things that are unique.
Right.
And the wheel works the same. The mechanism works the same for everyone, but the internal, what you name it, how it shows up is different for everybody.
Okay. So figure out your wheel, which is how you get into it, kind of what happens when you're in it. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah. So the wheel of fear is 4 parts. And there's also, even more importantly, something called the wheel of freedom, because we don't want to just have you identify what's stopping you, what that wheel of fear is. And by the way, people ask me all the time, well, did your wheel of fear change? The answer is no. Your fear responses might change because you evolve and get clever. But the wheel of fear is as smart as you are, educated as you are, spiritual as you are, knowledgeable as you are. So it knows what you know. You get more spiritual, it gets more spiritual. You get more knowledgeable, it gets more knowledgeable. So it uses everything that you do to benefit yourself, to become more fearless, is actually fodder for the wheel of fear to take you down and control you.
Okay. So you really need to know this stuff, because all the personal growth in the world isn't going to help if you don't really understand your wheel of fear.
Well, Julie, you just said the magic. I always say that once you understand the wheel of fear, you will then understand why you haven't been able to actualize those classes you've taken, or why, you've been stuck over here, even though you worked with a coach, or right. So it's almost like a door that unlocks everything that you've already learned and know. Because now you're not having the same conversations with yourself, right? You're also not obviously spending any time saying, what's wrong with me? Right. That conversation, right? Like imagine, and it takes away, what else it does, Julie, is it takes away beating yourself up. So all of that beating yourself up disappears, because you now understand it isn't you. You're not doing this to yourself purposely. You're not I hate that word, self-sabotage. It's like, I'm like, really, if they understood, would they really are they really like planning, like, ooh, I'm going to sabotage, but are they really planning to self-sabotage? No, I don't think so. No. So, the wheel of fear is tricky. It's invisible. It's tricky. Like I said, it knows everything you know. So I think people, in their quest to make people responsible, and which I do too, we're making people responsible for the invisible. And until we give them the tools to see the invisible, that invisible is going to run them no matter how smart they get, no matter how brave they are, no matter how successful they are. I mean, I've worked with multimillionaires, and they do all the same things. Right? A bus driver does, right? Doesn't matter.
Right. So they do all those things that hold themselves back. They do all the procrastination and worry and controlling and blaming and judging. And
right. And they might be great at business, but they may do it in their relationships, right? Because if you think of our lives separated into maybe 8 parts, our emotional life, family, friends, etc., we can be fearless. We're more fearless maybe in one area, right? Maybe we're really just trust ourselves in career, and we're awesome and we're amazing and we kick butt. But then we get into relationships, not so good, right?
I've met a lot of people who really do well out in the world, and then it really becomes a problem in their relationships, and they're very confused. They're like, well, I'm only successful over here. What's going on over there? And I kind of feel like our relationships are really where the rubber meets the road in this. It's
I mean, I would say that, I would say if people have an issue with their career, it's really an intimacy issue. And if people have a relationship with if they have a problem with their relationship, it's really a power issue, where people think it's the opposite. So it's like what you think the problem is. And yes, you're successful over here. Get it. Awesome. Yay, you. Woohoo, party. And then how do we apply those same skills? Well, it's a different part of your beingness, right? You're using a different, even though it's the same value system, it's applied differently, or maybe it's not the same value system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this keeps you centered because you have a goal, right? And a dream, right? But
Mm-hmm.
over here, not so much a goal, not so much a dream, right? It's just kind of is. I'm in this relationship.
Right.
So it just, yeah, the relationships are, as we all know, when we become, 92 and 105, relationships are all going to be all that matter.
Yeah. All that matters. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So you said the wheel of fear, and we need to learn, those are our patterns, how we get into it, what our pattern is. Okay.
How we're tricked by it.
And how we're tricked by it.
Because
Yes.
because your wheel of freedom, your true self, Julie, would never give into it. Right? Like if you had all your wits about you, right? If you had all your wits about you
Mm-hmm.
and you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world and all the support in the world and everything that you needed, you would never succumb to it. You just wouldn't.
Right.
But because you don't know it, you don't see it, you get tricked by it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you're dumb. I'm not dumb. You're not dumb. We're not dumb. But like I said, it knows us so well. It knows exactly what to say and what to do, right? It knows us inside and out.
And it knows, yes, exactly what to say, the little things that'll hook us and get us to respond in the way that it wants us to.
Yeah, and remember that our body, it's body sensations, because I think body sensations are missed a lot of times in coaching and therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Our body sensations are one of the key reasons that we don't do something, because we get that stomach ache or we feel sweaty or we have a thought or we have a feeling, etc. But a lot of times it's our body sensations that make our decisions for us.
I've actually pointed that out to people, because the sensations are weird. They're not like, oh, I've got like I'm nauseous necessarily. It can be a lot more subtle than that, but it's so aversive to us that we will do almost anything to make it stop.
That's right.
So we do some of the stupidest things.
That's right. That's right. And because we don't understand, again, how we work, and we don't understand that body sensations, that the brain doesn't know the difference between a physical fear and an emotional fear.
Yes.
So your body responds to an emotional fear exactly as it would a physical fear. And we can say that all day long, but think about like wanting to ask somebody out for the first time, and maybe that's a tough thing for you to do, right? Or ask for a raise, or open a business finally, or admit that you want to do this, gosh darn it, right? All of these things that are new, different, even though we've been thinking about them for a while, the actual doingness of it is going to have us. We have to cross over the wheel of fear. We have to move right through the wheel of fear, and most of us don't know how to do that or prepared for it. And then again, they self-sabotage in the sense of they blame themselves.
Yes, exactly. I'm too weak. I'm too whatever. They just,
if I just had more support, if I just had more money, if I just wasn't like this, if I didn't have my parents I had, if my mother wouldn't have died in my father's hand, if I wouldn't have been again, whatever it is that we've ever done, right? I mean, I can pull out every bad thing I've ever done, really quickly, right? If I wanted to. And I used to, because I used to believe, Julie, that I didn't have a right to be happy if I didn't save my mother. For 20 years, I didn't have a right to be happy. You don't get to be happy after you see your mother die. You don't get that.
Yeah. But through your exercises, you figured out you did have a right.
I did have a right. More importantly, I knew that it was the wheel of fear and had nothing to do with me. And so to be able to separate yourself from the fear mechanism, right? To be able to separate yourself and see yourself separate than that thing called the wheel of fear, you start getting some breathing room, and you stop self-judging, and you stop beating yourself up, and you stop, blaming yourself and putting yourself down, and, re-injuring yourself, re-traumatizing yourself.
So, okay. So what I've gleaned from all of this is like, there's this wheel of fear. It's going to get us regardless of how much we learn or study or whatever.
It's part of your neurobiology. There's no getting rid of it, right? There's literally no getting rid of. So if somebody says to you, get rid of fear forever, I'd be like, when's the lobotomy?
Yeah. Right.
Because it's part of our brain. It's part of how we work.
It's how we work. Exactly. So this wheel of freedom that we can use doesn't mean that it's not like the opposite of the wheel of fear.
No, it's not. It's not the opposite. And I think that's where a lot of therapists or, personal development experts or coaches get wrong. They think that, oh, if you're afraid to be a loser, be a winner, just affirm that you're a winner. It's like, aren't you affirming you're a winner because you're afraid to be a loser? And so isn't that just the other side of the same coin? Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, this whole opposite thing, I understand, the whole physics of it, from that perspective, but in personal development, into shifting your life, doing the opposite is only you running from the very thing you must embrace. So it's going to get you in the exact same, it's not going to get you out. It's just going to make you feel worse.
Right. Right. So this idea that, oh, well, I shouldn't be afraid is that you putting your back, you're actually yourself back on your wheel of fear at that point, because that's,
yeah, because I get that sometimes we have to talk ourselves through something, right? But that's also what we call in the wheel freedom of proactive behavior. But telling yourself that you shouldn't be afraid, again, I understand that, when I was a little girl and I used to walk by, there was this, on the way home from school, there was this like half a block of woods. Okay. But the half a block of woods was right next to a fraternity house. Okay. And I was like 10 years old, right? And those were all men, right? And my mother, made me like, don't, So I remember I would walk by that forest, a little bit of block, and by that fraternity house, because I had to go by it on the way home. I would walk by it and tell myself the 23rd Psalm.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
That was a proactive behavior. So I didn't tell myself, what's wrong with you? You're a bad person because of this. I just did something that supported me in reminding myself who I was.
Yeah.
Right. And that is totally cool. But beating yourself up and berating yourself for a natural human emotion. And oh, by the way, your brain is wired for fear, is only going to debilitate your self-esteem and self-confidence.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So, let's imagine it's not about work, and it's, we're in this marriage, or we want to be in a marriage, and we're struggling. We're like, how do I connect with and relate to another person so that they'll love me back?
Well, that the whole thing of them loving you back is where it goes wrong right away, right?
Yeah.
So my book Fearless Loving, which was my second book, I believe. Yeah, my second book. I talk about, are you willing to love yourself more than your desire to be adored, accepted, wanted by another human being? Because if you aren't willing to love yourself more than your desire to be accepted and wanted, etc., you will always compromise yourself. So we all want to be loved. Let's not kid ourselves. I want to be loved. We all want to be loved. Of course I want to be loved.
Right.
But more importantly, when you are understanding how the wheel of fear and wheel of freedom work, not only do you understand how your wheel of fear freedom work, you understand your partners, you understand your kids. I have people go through my coach certification program, not to become full-time coaches, but because they want to be an effective parent. I've had people go through my coach certification program or take the Fearless Living, join Fearless You to save their marriage, right? Because if you don't understand how you work, how are you going to impact another human being in a powerful, positive way, right? Yeah. So let's say I'm in a fight with my mate. Let's say we're having struggles, like you said. The first thing that I've got to do is get focused on how I work. And how is it that I'm showing up? Where do I take full responsibility? What is my responsibility versus the other person's responsibility? I always point out to my clients, where do you end? Where do you end here? This is where you end, right?
Yeah.
And where do they begin? Over there, over there, right? And I think most people, I know how I grew up, I didn't know how not to be enmeshed. I didn't know, I got my happiness if you loved me, period, end of story, for my first 30 years, probably 40 years of life, right? So, that's the only way I knew how to be okay with myself, is if you loved me. Right. And you being okay with me, then I was okay with me. But if you weren't okay with me, then I couldn't be okay with me.
Right.
So I had no self-choice. I had no choice there. I had no personal power. I had no, I'll just go back to the word choice. And, for most of my life, I knew I had, like, intellectually, because I'd read all those books and done all the work. I knew intellectually I had a choice. And I heard all those things like, you can become anybody you want to. And I'd be like, yeah, well, you get over a father killing your mom. It was nice in theory, right? But then how do you do it? And it wasn't until I really understood fear that then I was able to do that. Like, I'm like, oh, I really am not that. Oh, okay. Wait, I'm not that. I'm not that. Wait, wait. Oh, wow. And it was
it's because the whole I am, this idea of what you are, you're
yes,
able to put on the wheel of fear and look at it and say, oh, that's my fear talking. That's
that's
not
exactly,
me.
that's not me. And the wheel of freedom helps you come back to gain. So think of yourself by the time you're 5, research shows this over and over again, by the time we're 5, 7 years old, we have already learned, coping mechanisms. We've already thrown pieces of ourselves away in order to stay safe in our families. Even if you had a happy family, you had to learn how to let go of yourself. So the wheel of freedom, I want to think of it as a gathering, like it's gathering all the parts of yourself that you have disavowed, let go, thought they were shameful, like all those parts of you that can come back to you so that you can once again feel whole and who you really are and have all access to all parts of yourself.
Right. Okay. And it's getting access to those parts instead of being so self-critical and controlling and blaming and judging and all of that. Like it's bringing them all back into the fold and integrating them.
Yeah. I mean, I had integrating, of course, practice integrates, right? I had a client, fearless living training program, and it was a guy engineer, and he's like, well, I've got to beat myself up. It's how I motivate myself.
Yeah.
Okay. You and I've heard that 100,000,000 times, right? And luck had happened that day for me because I was asking people what they did that day. And he said, oh, he spoke to a 6th grade class. And I said, oh, okay. So did you tell the 6th graders about your strategy to become a better person and that they have to get really good at beating themselves up? Right. And he looked at me like, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I go, well, it works for you. Why wouldn't you let them in on your secrets? And he was horrified. Right?
Yes.
And I said, okay, so is it, if you're not willing to teach 6th graders your master plan of beating yourself up to motivate you, should you be doing it to yourself?
Yeah.
And he was like, right?
Great. So I'm imagining if I, in a relationship, got to know my wheel of fear and I'm working on my wheel of freedom, and I would start to recognize that the people that I am surrounding myself with have their own wheels of fear. Right. And that's causing them to blame and criticize and judge and worry and procrastinate and everything. Right. So do you have any advice on navigating that piece of it?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that you get to do is, one of the first things that I teach my students as well as train my coaches is to be able to see yourself as innocent and to lead with compassion. So if you starting to understand your wheel of fear, right? And then you go, oh, their wheel of fear is, I see their wheel. Oh, now I see their wheel of fear. Okay, got it. When you see their wheel of fear and you know it's their wheel of fear, you're not going to talk to them the way you would if you thought they were purposely doing this to you. Right. Or they were just being stubborn and stupid, right? Yeah. If you understood they were in self-preservation mode with their wheel of fear, that they were literally feeling like they were going to die, even though you and I are like, well, that's stupid, but to them, it's not stupid.
No.
Right.
And that whole I'm going to die thing, it's a thing. Like, I remember the day I ran smack into that and I was like, what the heck? I'm not going to die. But there was a part of me that thought I was.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, there's nothing wrong with you when you have that thought. It's just telling you what a level of risk you're taking.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just telling you, it's giving you information. Oh my God, this is a big risk. And I'm trying to blow it off, but it's like, I'm going to feel like I'm going to die. I mean, I remember forgiving my mother and forgiving my father and forgiving God. I literally was convinced, and logically, I knew the truth.
Yes.
Well, going back to those body sensations, every single part of my body was like, you are going to die. And everybody in your family is going to die too. Right. I mean, I remember I was just literally like, and I remember wrestling. I always say I was wrestling for like a half hour, and then I was able to break free. And I was able to break free because I was willing to go, well, I'd rather die than live like this. I would rather take the risk of dying.
Yes.
then withhold being my true self anymore. And then when you do that, it's almost like that death thing just poof, goes away, right? Just whew, and you think, what? How could it? Wait a minute. It was haunting me for 20 years and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it was just waiting for you to choose you. That's all it was waiting
Right.
for.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And to choose you in the face of that, because actually what happens in that moment is you are accepting that that fear is there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with you when you're afraid.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you when you're feeling stupid. There's nothing wrong with you when you're feeling sad. There's nothing wrong with you. You know, I like to take away the words negative and positive when we're talking about feelings. Because you and I both know that there are no negative feelings or positive feelings. I say that the feeling, every feeling and every value can be used in service to fear or freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So even a great value like integrity can be totally used in service to fear.
Yeah.
And rage and anger, which people see as a negative feeling, can be used in service to freedom.
Yes, very much. Very much so. Yeah. So I think it takes a lot of courage for people to like face their fear. And I spend a lot of time, you know, I talk with people a lot about people pleasing and the patterns that we get into around that, because we want people to love us, and how to step out of that and ask for what you need, even just to figure out what you need.
Oh,
I've
that,
so many
oh yeah.
people.
You don't know.
Just,
I didn't know for most of
yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
It was only after Fearless Living when I started, you know, being in relationships that were so healthy, you know, that I was even like, need, what do I need? What
Yeah.
need? I don't know what I don't need anything. It's like, yeah, you do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
have
Even
any?
giving yourself permission to have a need.
That would be the first step, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, just to give yourself permission to even have needs, you know, to even know that it's okay. You're not weak. Like, again, I grew up in Upper Michigan. I'm Finnish, surrounded by Finnish people who don't feel and don't have needs. Right.
Yes.
So just even admitting that I even wanted something, or that I needed you to hug me, you know, like, you know, I think of this relationship I was in, and I was crying, right? I was upset about something, so I was crying. And this was the first time I'd cried in this particular relationship. And I was like, like, not just like, but like, right? Like really cried.
Right.
And the guy literally jumped, he was sitting next to me. He literally jumped from the couch and went over to the other chair. Right.
Okay.
Because he was like, what the heck do I do? Right. And this is Fearless Living in action. I was like, would you come over here and hug me? You know, right? And he's like this, what? Come over here and hug me. And I mean, it was, it was like, I was asking him to perform surgery, right? Like, and he came over to me. He came over, he was brave, and he came, but you know, he hugged me like this, right? Like he didn't hug me. He was like, right. And if I was pre-Fearless Living, I would have been like, you can't even hug me. What's your problem? You can't even hold me when I'm crying, right? Instead, I knew that him just getting out from the couch and just coming over and holding me awkwardly, like with one hand and like 2 feet away, was huge.
Mm-hmm.
It was huge.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me, I don't know, 5 cries, 8 cries. And then he understood what I needed, right? But I asked for it. I said, come over and hug me. Yeah. And when he held me like this, Julie, I went like this. You know, I like leaned into him and just cried, right? And he was, you know, he got stiff. He was very awkward, but I didn't care about any of that, right? We're always focused on, well, they should be more loving and they should have said it this way. And they should have said, it's like, look, the fact that they're even asking is a miracle right now. Let's just focus on that.
Right.
You know,
and I think the fact that he complied the best he could with your request was
amazing.
And it really, to me, it's like your crying scared him.
Sure.
And other people's emotions can scare us. Other people's fear, right, can scare us. And so learning how to recognize, even within ourselves, like, oh, that other person's strong emotion is scaring me.
Yes.
So how do I deal with that? And then if you're trying to get somebody to do something and it's scaring them, be compassionate towards them, lean into it. Don't, don't get critical of them.
Yeah. And one of the research shows that the best sentence to use, a way to ask a question, is, would you be willing to? Right.
Yeah.
So using the phrase, would you be willing to? Because most people say, can you do this for me? And of course, the answer is, of course I can, but I don't want to. Right.
Right.
So it's not about can, it's not about ability. It's
Yes.
about, would you be willing to? Would you be willing to hug me when I cry? And you and I both know we have to be specific. We can't say, would you be nicer to me? Okay. I'm talking about men in general in my relationship. They don't know what I want. They don't know what that looks like. So you have to be, would you be willing to blank? And I work with my clients all the time in their relationships. I have one client right now. We just met yesterday. We were talking, and she and her husband have been married like 30 years. Right. And she's like, I don't know what I can take anymore. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, whatever, because she's getting used to having a voice, and he's getting used to her having a voice.
Right. Yes, there are two sides to that point.
That's right. There's two sides. And so we get knowledgeable about how we work, and we want them just to get it, but they haven't been in the classes we've been in.
Right.
They haven't been on the phone coaching with me. Right.
Right.
And I think of one of my coaches, Lorraine, and her husband. She became a coach for Fearless Living, started to do Fearless Living, talking to her husband differently and showing up differently. And he was very angry about it. Mm-hmm. But she just kept doing Fearless Living, kept using the tools of Fearless Living. And, she says it took him about over a year. And then he's her biggest fan. And when I was in the area recently, and I was giving a sermon at a friend's church, he came and heard me, right? He couldn't wait to meet me and talk to me. But if he would have met me the first year when she was, right, when he was getting acclimated to this new way of being. And I think that's what we do. We throw away relationships because we're like, well, they're not getting it. It's like, well, yeah, but they haven't taken the last 5 years of classes.
Yes.
They haven't been to therapy 20 times.
Right.
So, are you going to focus on you and practice your skills, allowing them the grace to catch up? And it might take a year and a half, 6 months, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It might take some time.
Yeah. They're not in the classes.
Right. How are they supposed to know?
Yeah. They're not supposed to know. And you telling them is not helpful.
Right.
Right. You coaching them is not helpful.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say how good of a conversation this has been. This has been awesome. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Julie.
Taking the time to do this. How can people find you?
Fearlessliving.org. Go on over to fearlessliving.org. And I would be happy to gift your class. We talked about needs a minute ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I would be happy to gift all of your listeners to my class called Getting Your Needs Met.
Oh, that would be awesome.
When you go, it's just about an hour and a half class. So it's really quick. It's a master class, Getting Your Needs Met. You're going to be shocked. People who go and take the time to do this for themselves are going to be shocked at all the different ways we have needs that I was never taught. I don't think most people are taught all the ways that we have needs. Right. So you're going to be so surprised and feel so relieved, on the other hand, because you're going to be like, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not selfish. I'm not stupid. No, you're not. You actually have a right to that need. Oh, so yeah, I would be happy to gift every one that's hanging out with us today, Getting Your Needs Met.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I know we all need that.
Oh, needs are one of my things too. Whenever I'm in a tangle with another human being, right? Tangled with I immediately go to needs and go, okay, wait a minute. Now, the first question I ask obviously is my wheel of freedom and wheel of fear. So my wheel of fear is loser. My wheel of freedom is anchored in authenticity. So I will ask myself a minute, where am I not being authentic? Oh, and that, usually is like, right? Darn it. Right. So and then it's, part of that authenticity may be admitting I have a need.
Right.
Might be asking for what I need. Part of that authenticity is reaching out for support or getting help.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why the wheel of fear shows up, because a lot of us are taught that having needs isn't okay. It's selfish to put myself first.
Well, again, being raised where I did, it was selfish to do anything for yourself. My mother, my sister was taking piano lessons, and I was like, I want to take piano lessons. And my mother's like, well, you can, because your sister is, it's like, there was no room for sharing anything, right? There was no room
Mhm.
for my motto. What I was handed down was, don't make your sisters feel bad. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm actually not even doing anything to them. I'm actually just doing my thing.
Right.
And, I'm just over here playing basketball. And I got a shot, I got 2 points. Doesn't make them feel bad. It's just I'm playing basketball, right?
Right.
But my success, because my mother and father didn't know how to manage emotions and know needs.
Right.
They didn't know how to talk to us. And so my sisters would be in that competitive mindset, right? Comparing mindset,
Mhm.
and will feel bad about themselves. And it had nothing to do with me.
Yes.
And then but I was to blame all the time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, that gets tied into us as we're growing up, and we as adults have to detangle that, right? We have to do the delicate work of detangling. And that's where the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom make it a lot easier.
Nice. Nice. And you outlined that so beautifully in your book, Fearless Living. So people could check it out there too. Yeah.
Yes, definitely go get Fearless Living.
Yeah.
It'll open your eyes and make you feel sane. There's nothing wrong with you, it's just fear. There's nothing wrong with you, it's just fear. There's nothing wrong with you, it's just fear.
Nice. Nice. Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to let you go, and you have a great day.
Thank you, Julie.